Hey everyone, Cleo here and welcome to my channel, and today we are looking once more into the future, looking at 2020, the next reading year. I don't know about you guys, but I'm already so excited for the next year. I feel like in a way, because I'm already looking at like what I'll be reading in 2020 and some of my 2020 goals, like the reading that I'm doing at this month feels more like, okay, let's just get this over and done with so we can start with the next year. But so this is definitely something that I want to, this attitude is definitely something that I want to get rid of, because I definitely want to remain in the moment and enjoy the things that I'm reading at the moment. But so for the video for today, I'm going to be looking at the 12 books that I want to read in 2020. Obviously I want to be reading a lot more than that, but I'm very much more of a like mood reader, so I don't want to set myself too many books, but I did like that by having a sort of overarching 2020 TBR, there were some books on these shelves that were automatically getting read. So if you've seen my goals for 2020 video, you know that one of my biggest goals is to get rid of a lot of these unread books on the shelves behind me. And these 11 of the 12 books that are on this list are on those shelves, and so automatically I hope to be getting rid of another 11 books of my unread shelf from in the year of 2020. So the majority of them are, so all of them are on there for some reason or another, mainly to do with some goals that I still want to finish, or a reread that I'm still working on, or things like that. But I'll mention that when I get around to the books. So the main reason why I'm not doing 19 books, or like, so in 2019 I did 19 books for 2019, I'm not doing 20 for 2020, because if you've been following my channel, you know that 6 out of the 19 books still need to be read in the months of November and December of 2019. So I want to avoid the situation in the future, because this way I feel like I've kind of like cornered myself in these 2 months to have to finish the majority of them. And so I just believe that it's just too much for me to have like a fixed list of 19 books that I want to get to in a year, because as I mentioned before, I'm very much a mood reader, so what I want to get around to might change a lot throughout the year. So without any further ado, let's dive into the books. Now first up is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I don't know too much about this book, but this book is always on those lists of like best books of all times, must-read books, so I want to read this one for myself and see what all the fuss is about and whether it deserves this type of praise. I assume that that will mean that there's some sort of like important message to our time, or it might have had an important impact on the literary genre, but so I'll be discovering that for myself when I get around to it. Next up is a book for which I've seen the movie. I love the movie, but I also know that it's not for everybody. But main reason why this landed in my bookshelves is because it won the Golden Man Booker Prize. You know, I was kind of unsure whether I wanted to read it, because the movie is, I really like the movie, you know, but the movie's slow for a movie. And then you can imagine that the book is also going to be slow, most likely. And so I don't always do well with slow books, so I was kind of hesitant to go into it, but when it won the Golden Man Booker, I was like, okay, I'm going to assume that that means something, you know, that out of all the Man Booker Prizes winners of the past 50 years, they've decided that the one book that was most worth it was this one, and that is The English Patient by Miguel Ondaatje. So if you've seen the movie The English Patient, you know that it's slow. It's about a man who's in a like, he's not really in a hospital, I think he's more like in private care, but so it's during one of, doing a great job here. Let's start again. So The English Patient is about a man who gets wounded in Second World War, and he's lying in a hospital and being taken care of. He's got like burns all over his face, and so he's kind of unrecognizable and things like that. And he tells the story of his great love to his nurse while he's being taken care of there. I really love the movie, I will say that. I know that it's definitely not for everybody, and I think that like the first time I watched it, it was also quite difficult for me to enjoy it the entire way through, but I have rewatched it since, and I really do love it, so I'm looking forward to getting around to the book. And if I like this one, then I can also dive into his more recent book that was also nominated for a Booker Prize, which is Warlights, but I'll definitely first go through this one and see whether his writing style is to my appeal or not. Next up, we have a book that I'm reading and that I'm planning to get around to in the month of January. I don't know, I'm saying this already now, it's the month of November, but I'm also dying to get certain things, certain reads in, and so maybe I will change my mind about that. But at this point my goal is to read it in January, and that is Quichotte by Salman Rushdie. Now this book is based off of the Don Quixote by Don Diego de Cervantes, the great Spanish author, and I don't know too much about it. It's going to be some sort of a retelling. So in the original Don Quixote de la Mancha, he is driven mad by literature, and he sets out on this quest to, I think, save his fair maiden or something like that, and he gets into all sorts of adventures, and his like reluctant servant is traveling around with him. And you also see two characters here, which I assume is going to be a sort of Don Diego de Cervantes, Don Quixote de la Mancha, and a Sancho Panza. But I don't know too much about it. I haven't read the original Don Quixote neither, so I don't know what to think of it, but this is one of the Booker Prize nominees for 2019, and I definitely want to get that shortlist done with so that I can give you my thoughts about them. Next up is the first reread for Harry Potter for next year. So if you've been following my channel, you might know that I do a reread of Harry Potter. I started it last year. I read the first 3 books last year. I read the 4th one this year, still need to finish the 5th one in 2019, and then for 2020, for 2020 the 6th and 7th books are on the agenda. So first up is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. This is the Spanish edition. My reread for Harry Potter this time is in Spanish. I will be doing a sort of like ranking of Harry Potter at the end of my reread. So Half-Blood Prince was not my favorite book upon first reading, and it's probably the book that I've reread least. I mean, I even think I reread Chamber of Secrets more, just because it's like the 2nd book, so when I start rereading, it's one of the first that I reread, and then most often I will stop at some point with my rereads. But so now I'm really going through with all of them, and so I'm actually very much looking forward to rereading Half-Blood Prince, because hopefully I will discover that I actually like it a lot more than I think, and hopefully it will go up in the standings for my enjoyment of Harry Potter books. So Half-Blood Prince definitely coming your way in 2020. Next up is A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. Like Catch-22, this book has been on my TBR forever, and it needs to get read. Don't know too much about it. It's also one of those books that's always on the like must-read books or most influential books of all times list. I want to see what that is about. A friend of mine has read it, didn't really like it, but we are known to have different reading tastes, so hopefully that will just mean that it's a book for me, but not one for her then. Next up is a book that I will say I've known about this book forever. I wasn't interested, but it also got nominated for the Golden Man Booker, and the 3rd book in the trilogy is coming out soon, and everybody's raving about how this is one of the greatest authors of our times, and this is one of the greatest trilogies. So I actually also now want to explore what it is about, and that is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Wolf Hall is supposed to be, it seems to be like a political intrigue trilogy. It's about Thomas Cromwell, so I don't know what time that is actually in English history. It seems to be Tudor era, so like time of Henry VIII and things like that. I have always been interested by Tudor era. I really liked watching TV shows or movies set in that era. I've never really read anything set in that time, so I hope that I'll actually really enjoy it. I don't know why I wasn't interested in it. I guess I just don't read that much historical fiction. Well, I'm intrigued to get around to it now because of all the positive reviews that it's been getting, and so I want to hop on the bandwagon and read Wolf Hall in order to know whether this is something for me and whether I can continue with the series. Next book in this series is coming out March 2020. I don't plan on forcing myself to read this before March 2020, but you never know. But in any case, I want to get a start on this series in 2020. Next up is another Man Booker Prize, well, Booker Prize, this year it's just the Booker Prize. So next up is another Booker Prize nominee, and that is Dutch Ducks, Newburyport by Lucy Ellman. This is the biggest one. It is a 1,000-page novel, which frightens me a lot, especially since it is stream of consciousness, and I don't do well with stream of consciousness. But I have seen a lot of reviews that say once you start on this, you get sucked into this world and it doesn't feel like a chore, and you find yourself wanting to read further into it. So I hope that that is true for me. It doesn't necessarily sound super interesting because it's just like a stream of consciousness book about a American housewife. So that's basically all I know about it, and it just makes me think like, okay then. But a lot of people were actually rooting for this one to win the Booker Prize, so I'm very interested to see what my thoughts are on this. So far with the Booker Prize nominees, so I've read 3 at this point. I've liked 2 of them. One I absolutely don't think should have been in there. And of the 2 of them that I read, like one of them I liked for half and I didn't really like that much for the other half. And the other one I really did enjoy, and that's one of the 2 winners. So I have mixed feelings about the Booker Prize shortlist for 2019 so far, so hopefully this one will redeem the Booker Prize shortlist for me for 2019. Next up is second book in my Harry Potter reread, and obviously the last one, and that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. It's difficult when you have the Spanish edition in front of you to remember, apparently. So Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, as I said before, Spanish rereads, the final book in the series. I often consider it to be like third favorite or something like that. So we'll see. I'm absolutely excited to get to it, just because at the end of this I can rank them. At the end of this I will know that I've reread them all again. I can safely state my order and hopefully keep from rereading for a bit, because I've been rereading too much lately. I feel I want to get some more books read that I haven't read before. So last up in my reread for Harry Potter, which will be the end of a 3-year project, and hopefully a very interesting video for you guys to watch afterwards. Next up are 2 books that fit together, and that is Don Quixote de la Mancha Part 1 and Part 2. So, as I said before, I haven't read Don Quixote de la Mancha, and since I will be reading Quijote by Salman Rushdie, I was like, perfect time to pick up Don Diego de Cervantes' Don Quixote de la Mancha. It's Miguel de Cervantes. I've been saying Diego de Cervantes the entire time, but it's Miguel de Cervantes. So Don Quixote de la Mancha is a 16th century classic. It is the biggest piece of classic of Spanish literature. It is also 1,500 pages long, so yeah, that is scary, very scary. So I want to tackle it this year. As I said before, it's about a person being driven mad by reading too much literature, setting out on his big quest in because of all of the books that he's been reading. He wants to go on his personal quest as well, and so the most famous scene of Don Quixote de la Mancha is the fight against the windmills, but as it is 1,500 pages long, I'm assuming a lot more needs to be happening in it, which scares me, you know. I'm afraid that I'm going to be kind of bored with it, but I hope to be proven wrong, of course. This is in total, of course, the biggest chunk of my reading list, but in that sense it's good that I have it in like a 2-book edition, that I can spread it over multiple months maybe even. And then the final book on my 2020 TBR is the final shortlisted book for the Booker Prize for me to get to, and that is An Orchestra of Minorities by Chigozie, Obioma. Now, I don't know too much about this except that it is a retelling of the Odyssey by Homer. The Odyssey, as far as I'm aware, is about Odysseus at the end of the Trojan Wars. He sets out with his crews, I think they are called the Argonauts, to return back to their homeland, but a series of disasters ensues, and so they land on different islands. I think they land on the island with the Cyclones, for example, and on the island with Medusa or Circe. I don't know. We will see. I don't think it's going to be a literal retelling, of course. I think it's mostly more going to be about the themes of migration and things like that. So we'll see. Intrigued about this. I know that it's kind of like, it's kind of a forgotten book on the shortlist in my opinion. Most people who were talking about the shortlist for the Booker Prize 2019 didn't really seem to have much to say about this book. I don't know whether it was because this book was published a lot earlier than the other books, and so it was a book that most of them had already read before, or whether it's really something that they just felt like kind of fell out of the list and wasn't as good as the rest of the list according to them. But I will discover my opinion about them throughout my reading for it. As I kind of intoned at some point, my goal is to maybe try to get the Booker Prize shortlist done in January, because I only finished it in July last year, and so I definitely want to be done with it earlier, but I won't force myself to do that neither, because I already have like my November plans, my December plans fixed, and if I already also fixed my January plans already, that would mean like that there's no place for any whim, and I'm already feeling a lot of whims coming up in terms of what I want to read. So most likely I'm going to deviate from this plan in the month of January. But so yeah, these are my plans for 2020. Of course I'm going to be reading a lot more than these, but these 12 books are definitely books that I want to somewhat prioritize in 2020. Definitely let me know down below if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts are about them. Are they worth it? Do you think like I might have a hard time with some of them? Definitely let me know if I should prioritize some of these because you feel like they are so good and that I'm really missing out by not having read them so far. But yeah, comment down below and let me know, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!